Mm. Hi, Chirayu. Can you please check whether your audio and video is working perfect?
Hi, Samriddhi. Good evening.
Yeah.
Yes, it seems it's working good for me.
Okay, thank you. It's good to have you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ashita Singh from UNESCO New Delhi Regional Office for South Asia, and we welcome our esteemed speakers, panelists, and participants to the celebration of the International Day for Universal Access to Information 2024. 20th September every year is celebrated as International Day for Universal Access to Information, which aims at spreading awareness concerning the need to expand laws related to information and their actual implementation. The regional theme for today's webinar is The Era of AI, Future of Peace and Security, where we are going to experience and explore how utilizing AI effectively can be a transformative tool in enhancing security and promoting peace. We are going to talk about how to address ethical and regulatory considerations, understand how peace and security is aided by advancements in AI, foster international cooperation, and identify future directions. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Ezekiel Lamini for presenting the welcome remarks. Mr. Lamini is the advisor for communication and information for South Asia at the UNESCO New Delhi office. Before joining UNESCO New Delhi, he worked with UNESCO in Paris and Africa and has more than 30 years of experience in supporting communication and information policies and practices in developing countries, especially in Africa. He has participated in the reforming and formulation of African national communication and information policies to support free expression, access to information, and safety of journalists. Over to you, Ezekiel.
Thank you very much, Ashita. A very good day to you, wherever you are joining us from. On behalf of Tim Curtis, the director of the UNESCO New Delhi office, I would like to welcome everyone joining us today. Special welcome goes to the speakers and presenters today. We thank Advocate Samriddhi Arora for inspiring and leading the organization of this satellite event under the auspices of the AI for Information Access Global Conference, as well as her availability to moderate it today. This event has been organized with the Working Group on Information Accessibility under UNESCO's Information for All program, IFAP. And I'm very pleased that Mr. Cordell Green, Vice Chair of the UNESCO Information for All program and Chairperson of the Working Group on Information Accessibility, is also among us. For us, this event also marks this year's celebration of the International Day for Universal Access to Information, as you have already heard. Not only globally, but also for us in South Asia as a region. And it is an important and significant advocacy platform for promoting the right to access information in transparent, accountable, and sustainable ways. This year's global theme, which is mainstreaming access to information and participation in the public sector, shines the spotlight on the importance of access to information as a fundamental right and a cornerstone of democracy and sustainable development. I thank you, and we look forward to insightful discussions during this session and further collaboration going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ezekiel, for the welcoming speech. Now I would like to invite Mr. Caudle Green for presenting the opening remarks. Mr. Green is an attorney at law and the Executive Director of the Broadcasting Commission in Jamaica and also former Assistant Attorney General of Jamaica. His other affiliations include being Vice Chairman of UNESCO Information for All Program, Chairman of the UNESCO I5 Working Group on Information Accessibility, member of the International Institute of Communication, advisory board member, honorary member of the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council, Washington, D.C., and the chairman of the Regulatory and Technical Committee for Digital Television, which over in Jamaica. Over to you, Mr. Caudle.
Thank you very much. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, I greet you warmly from Jamaica in your various capacities. We gather at a time when artificial intelligence joins the pantheon of great human inventions that permanently shape society. Of course, we will only have a future if our increasingly close acquaintance with advanced machines does not lead to an apocalyptic end. So let us keep in mind Mustafa Suleiman's observation that, quote, technology's unavoidable challenge is that its makers quickly lose control over the path their inventions take. In other words, as technology proliferates, more people can use it, adapt it, shape it in chains of causality beyond any individual's comprehension. Hence, exhortations such as that of the late Professor Stephen Hawking, that AI poses an existential threat to humanity. But a threat does not equate to an inevitable outcome. Neither is our choice a binary one of utopian AI hype or crippling AI dystopia. To have a good outcome, we would do well to consider the qualities that make us human, the values that are at stake, the duties that derive from those values, and that all of our human values constitute terms and conditions of a social contract that binds the living, the dead, and the unborn. And in that context, it does not take much contemplation to discern the tension that possibly might arise when we insert human-like technological species in this social arrangement. We should therefore elevate AI governance as a special factor and determine with a high degree of particularity those functions in society which AI might not or should not be allowed to perform for security, humanistic, or ethical reasons. If nothing else is clear, it cannot be repeated enough that the deployment of advanced technologies for efficiency gains and economic and social advancement must not be done in a manner which devalues the quality of being human and threatens the sustainability of the human race. This is the background against which this distinguished panel of experts will tackle the subject of AI, peace, and security. This panel is one of 8 from around the world, culminating on September 28, when we meet on the GatherTown platform for the flagship AI for IA virtual conference with over 68 speakers. All the information we are making available is part of our collective task to eliminate information asymmetry and write, hopefully, a story about human flourishing. Let me conclude by thanking members of the UNESCO IFAP Working Group on Information Accessibility, which I have the pleasure of chairing, the very small band of, and it's a small group of AI for IA conference organizers from India, Jamaica, UK, Canada, USA, Chile, Ukraine, Germany, China, South Africa, and Botswana, supported by the UNESCO IFAP Secretariat in Paris, the UNESCO Regional Office for Southern Africa, the UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean, the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica, University of Alberta in Canada, and the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. But most of all, I extend our gratitude to the UNESCO Delhi office, Samriddhi Arora, and the distinguished speakers on today's satellite panel. See you on the GatherTown platform on Saturday, September 28. Thank you. Migan, big up on yourself. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Caudle-Green, for the wonderful opening remarks. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Samriddhi Arora to moderate the panel discussion. Ms. Samriddhi Arora is an advocate on record at the Supreme Court of India, combines her legal expertise with a passion for social justice, a gold medalist in law, a member and a rapporteur of the UNESCO IFAP, and chair of the Planning Committee of the Artificial Intelligence for Information Accessibility Conference. Recognized for her contributions, she is a recipient of the India-UK Achievers Award 2024. Ms. Samriddhi will carry forward the discussions from here onwards. Over to you, Ms. Samriddhi.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all around the world, and welcome to our panel discussion on the era of AI, future of peace and security. I'm delighted to see such a diverse and engaged participants virtually present here today. As we all know, artificial intelligence is advancing at an unprecedented pace, and its potential impact on global peace, security, and military dynamics cannot be overstated. Today, we are here to explore the multifaceted role of AI in shaping the future of conflict and cooperation. We have an esteemed panel of experts who bring up wealth of knowledge from military planning, industry innovation, and regulatory frameworks. Together, they will help us understand the complexities and implications of AI in these critical areas. Let me take a moment to introduce our distinguished panelists, Dr. Vivek Lal, who serves as the Chief Executive of General Atomics Global Corporation. He possesses an impressive leadership background in the defense and aerospace industries. In addition to his executive role, Dr. Lal is a distinguished visiting fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He has advised numerous global institutions and has been recognized with several prestigious honors, including the President's Lifetime Achievement Award from the President of the United States in 2022 and the World Leader Award from the UK's House of Lords in 2023. We have Professor Ingvild Both, who's an expert member of the Global Commission on Responsible AI in the Military Domain and currently serves as a director of the Center for War Studies at University of Southern Denmark. She is also co-chair of IEEE SA Research Group, where she focuses on the intersection of AI, autonomy, and defense system. We have Mr. Chirayu Thakur, who is a final year doctoral candidate at both the National University of Singapore and King's College London. His research delves into India's foreign and security policies, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region and international security studies. Chirayu has contributed significantly to various academic journals and over 30 publications, both in India and internationally. Prior to this, he served as a visiting fellow at the Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. Now that we are familiar with our panelists, let's dive into the discussion. Mr. Chirayu, to set the scene, could you elaborate on how advances in artificial intelligence are becoming integral to military planning? Are we witnessing a new landscape for warfare, or is AI merely enhancing existing methods?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are joining us. Thank you for participating in this wonderful conversation. And thank you, UNESCO, for putting together this wonderful panel of experts. And it's very apt that, especially when we are celebrating this day of accessibility to information, we are discussing artificial intelligence, because there are so many myths about artificial intelligence, especially in the realm of military and warfare and conflict. And some of it is exacerbated by our consumption of popular media, sci-fi movies and Netflix. And people think that, you know, next war will have laser guns and UFOs flying. But you know, some of the recent news has given us reality check. So only a few days ago, we learned that pagers were getting blasted and you know, walkie-talkies were getting blasted. And when the news first pop up on my own phone screen, it was a Reuters notification that several pagers have been blasted. And I was like, are we talking about the same pagers that my grandparents used to use, or you know, my dad once upon a time used? Because it's simply unimaginable that this can also be a mode of warfare with these advances. But that is also some sort of a reality of contemporary warfare, that anything could be weaponized. So let us not get into that you know, imagination of sci-fi or what Hollywood serves us as artificial intelligence. So if I were to simply put, there are two ends of the spectrum. And one end is where really artificial intelligence has made its way into warfare. And there is another end of the spectrum where a lot of this is on an experimental basis. So I'll just describe this thing. So on the other hand, the first end of the spectrum, humans are in absolute control. And artificial intelligence or machine learning or whatever, some of these advances in our information processing, analyzing, and generative AI, etc., they are just helping us better in processing information. But humans are in absolute control at one end of the spectrum. The second end of the spectrum is there is no human agency at all. It is purely a machine-driven, machine-analyzed, machine intelligence that is driving the warfare. And let me start with the first aspect of it. So if you look at warfare, now what is the fundamentals of warfare? The fundamentals are whether it's sea, whether it's air, whether it's subsea, or whether it's ground. You take any media, the primary nature of warfare is you hit your opponent without getting tracked, without opening yourself to attack from your opponent. So you continue to hide yourself while map the presence of your enemy, and you continue to attack them, pulverize them. And therefore, you have to hide yourself while finding your enemy. And the opposite is also true. So in scholarly parlance, we use the word that there is a constantly hider finder competition, or some sort of a cat and mouse competition going on between them. Now, how do we find the opponent on the battlefield? So there is something called battle space awareness. So you primarily map the battlefield and try to understand the positioning of your opponent. Now, this could be done in multiple ways. If the opponent is very clearly visible with naked eye, then you can do recon. So for example, if we go back to 1962, when this whole Cuban Missile Crisis thing happened, the B-2 bombers, they were flying across Cuba, and what they saw was, with the simple cameras, they were able to detect the position of missiles, and that's how they learned that the Soviets had actually shipped nuclear missiles to Cuba. But not everything is clearly visible. So with the advances in technology, we use different sort of signatures. Now, these are electromagnetic signatures through radars. So primarily signatures, electromagnetic signals are, emitted. They go to ionosphere, they come back. And in this process, if an object comes in between, these signals are deflected and then they are received by the receptor. So this is the primary concept of a radar. So that's how some blurry, object comes onto your screen and you realize that something is happening. Now, if it is not your weapon, then it has to be your opponent's weapon, or at least you have to make sense of that signal. Similarly, apart from electromagnetic signals, in the subsea level, there are sonar signals. So your sound signals, they are mapped and they are analyzed. And third is the thermal signature. So any element has its own thermal signature. So all these signatures, they are specifically sent in the battle space to understand what are the positions of your enemies and where you want to direct your target at. So you have a weapon, but where do you hit? So for that, something you call that is battle space awareness. Now, a lot of these signatures, they don't come as clear photographs. They come as, blurry signals. Some of the times they are like very grainy pictures that appear on your screens. And you need to understand, what is the object? What is the positioning of the object? What is the level of certainty with which you can say that, oh, this is a B-2 bomber, or this is like a Chinese fighter jet, or this is a Russian fighter jet. You have to say with some degree of certainty to try to prevent them. And these are very split-second decisions, because the fighter jets, they are flying at such a fast pace that you only have a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes, depending on the pace at which they are coming, that you have to make a choice whether you want to hit or you don't want to hit. And I think this is one area where AI is playing a very major role, because then you have your past data in terms of libraries, but a lot of noise is coming, a lot of signals are coming, and in sorting this noise and signal and really giving battle space awareness, AI is helping there. So that is one aspect of it. At the second end, humans play very minimalistic role, and something that is called the lethal autonomous technology. So primarily these are like unmanned drones, but these drones are also not flown by some, and again, how the movies glamorizes a geeky 16-year-old sitting in an uncapped cabin and he's trying. It's not like that. It's primarily lethal and autonomous. So they are lethal, they are able to hit the target, and they are able to pulverize the target, but they are autonomous. So they do the mapping of the field on their own. They run their algorithms and they make a choice. Now, this is a very dangerous area, And that is where I think Professor Bode will also come in a second, and she'll talk about the regulatory and ethical aspects of it. But this is one area which is worrisome for us. See, the first aspect is it can have the potential to save lives and prevent and act as a deterrence. The more technological advances help you understand the field, there is a chances that something can act as a deterrent and help save you lives. But the autonomous end of the spectrum, this is what scares people and military planners, and that is where some real challenges are there. Thankfully, we still don't have a lot of those objects totally autonomous currently in use, but they are under development in many militaries around the world, and that is something that we need to be very careful. And I would just like to add one more point, and then end my first intervention. The key here is something that started in the last century, what is called the demassification of war. Now, demassification of war has two primarily aspects of it. One, increasingly less and less number of people are signing up to fight the war. And second, in democracies, more and more body bags coming that can really impact your political standing domestically. So you look at the opposition to the Vietnam War or opposition to Afghanistan, a lot of that came from this idea that, we are losing too many lives. So it can be politically risky. And on the other hand, you do not have a lot of people signing up to fight the war. And therefore, both of these factors, they are driving increasingly militaries to the autonomous side of it. But there can be very serious ramifications of that kind of technology. And that is the end of the spectrum that should worry all of us. So this is what the idea of AI and warfare intermingling to set the scene.
Dr. Lal, following that, I would like to ask you about the drivers behind AI innovation. Is it primarily coming from the industry, or is government involvement shaping this landscape? Are militaries worldwide appropriating innovations designed for civilian use?
First of all, thank you, Samriddhi, for this kind invitation, and thank you to UNESCO. It's a privilege to be here and with the eminent other speakers. So that's an excellent question, and I think the fact lies that both industry and government drive AI innovation. On the industry side, of course, you have technology giants that invest heavily in AI research and development. As you know, there are many startups now in AI, whether you look at the United States or India or other countries, and a lot of innovation in areas like autonomous vehicles and robotics. And the third aspect from the industrial side would be the venture capitalists. A lot of VC firms are funding AI-related startups and fostering innovation. Of course, there's a lot of government-driven innovation as well, and therefore you have research funding. Governments provide grants for AI research, often focusing on strategic areas, not only in defense, but also in healthcare and education. And then, of course, there are defense and intelligence agencies that drive AI innovation for national security reasons. And then not to exclude, but space is the new frontier, and there are various organizations that are exploring AI applications in space as well. So as a result, from a collaboration standpoint, there are public-private partnerships. Governments partner with industry leaders to develop AI solutions for both civilian and military applications. Then, of course, there are dual-use technologies, innovations developed for civilian purposes are adapted for military use. And research from universities, finally, and government labs is transferred to industry and vice versa. So that's another form of collaboration. So militaries around the world do appropriate innovations primarily built for civilian comfort, such as autonomous vehicles, AI-powered sensors, natural language processing, etc. And however, militaries also drive innovations in areas like cybersecurity, predictive maintenance, decision support systems. And if you go to the different countries, you'll see a lot of AI government-led AI initiatives. So therefore, I would say industry leaders and governments do work together, sharing expertise and resources to advance AI capabilities.
Professor Bode, your insights into regulating AI are invaluable. I have two interrelated questions for you. First, how much do ethics feature in the discourse surrounding AI and warfare? And second, do you believe policymakers fully grasp the complexity of the regulatory challenges they face?
Yeah, thank you so much, Samriti, first of all, for putting together this event, and I'm very grateful to be speaking as part of this panel. And thank you to UNESCO for, of course, convening this whole series. So, I mean, thank you. I think that's quite a big question, right? So let me start with the ethics part. I mean, I should maybe preface by saying that the debate about military applications of AI is around 10 years old, right? So it's kind of maybe older than some of you would have expected, but also not that old as one would have hoped. And I think so. Really, around 2014, we see the beginnings of this agenda at the so-called certain conventional weapon systems. Sorry, it's a very complicated title, which is a disarmament forum at the UN in Geneva. And to address your first question, ethics have always been an important part of the international debate. So I think it was actually the ethical concerns that prompted this debate in the first place. So Mr. Cordell-Green actually mentioned some of these basic ethical concerns in his remarks. So the basic or the key ethical question in this field really is the extent to which humans remain in control over the use of force. And this concern, I think, applies both to the specific moment when kinetic force is used, so what also Chirayu was speaking about in his interesting intervention, but also to the wider decision-making around targeting that Dr. Alal mentioned, so that I think it's quite interesting to remark that maybe when the debate first started, we focused a lot on AI in weapon systems in particular, so in drones and other types of platforms. Whereas now, and I think especially with the ongoing Israel-Hamas war, the focus has become a lot more on how is actually AI part of the wider targeting decision-making. But I think concerns around the human role are applicable to both of these kind of contexts, right? Because we basically are in a situation where we delegate certain thinking tasks to AI technologies, right? That's the main purpose, right? So that's why we are integrating these technologies also in the military sphere. And this changes, I think, the exercise of human agency in warfare. The fundamental question then becomes this delegating of life and death decisions to machines potentially, right? So this would be really, we're talking here about the fully autonomous end of the spectrum, right? Where and there are many issues, obviously, of fundamental moral, ethical issues around the act of killing and our relationship with technology, right? That are determined by how we think about the role of AI in making these types of decisions. And I think in very broad terms, ethicists would argue that such a move would violate human dignity because it would turn humans into mere data points, right? So you hear this very often voiced by both ethicists, but also international civil society actors around the world. So the idea here is that machines can't really appreciate, right, the value of human life. And I think there are also broader questions in terms of the people exercising force or kind of using these types of machines or AI technologies in their decision-making processes on use of force, because you could also argue that this devalues moral agency, right? So in a sense, sorry, I'm gonna have a bit of late evening sun here in Denmark, unexpected. So that there is a problem that we can't simply offload moral agency in terms of these kind of very fundamental decision-making processes onto machines, because moral agency as a concept and as a notion is really fundamentally socially situated and anchored in human relations. So, and I think it's also quite interesting that the safeguarding of human control over the use of force is also something of a societal gut reaction, right? So there are many surveys conducted. I think the last one in 2021 showing actually there's an increase of negative public attitudes worldwide towards so-called fully autonomous weapon systems. So I think that's so on the one hand, I think these ethical issues are quite well developed in the debate, and they have been around for some time. At the same time, I would say that their relative importance has been changing over time. So and this has to do with kind of certain dynamics of how the international governance debate has been characterized by. So, for example, there's been a gradual increase of a focus on legal issues, right? So the issue of lawfulness rather than basic issues around legitimacy. And of course, I'm not saying that the lawfulness issue is not an important issue. Obviously, it is. But this focus on law and then a particular set of international law, international humanitarian law, has shaped the debate quite a bit, right? Because those of you who are from a legal persuasion, right, so will know that international humanitarian law obviously is more permissive of the use of force as compared to other bodies of international law, such as international human rights law. Yeah, so I think at the moment, ethical issues seem to be a bit in a limbo in the debate. I mean, they're still considered important, but they have been a bit overshadowed by these legal issues. And the second part of your question, do policymakers understand the complexity of this issue and the challenges in front of them? I have an optimistic and a pessimistic answer to that. On the optimistic side, overall, I would say yes. So I've had the opportunity to follow this particular forum in Geneva over the past 7 years. And in that time, you can really see that the state delegations have built considerable expertise on the issue of AI and weapon systems. And through drawing on expert advice, both internally and externally, right? And I think we can really see that there is, if you compare kind of what is discussed at the substance of it in 2017 to today, you will see that they're worlds apart, right? In terms of the depth of the issue being discussed and how states parties are wrapping their heads around this issue. On the other hand, the more pessimistic answer is that I think that the issue still remains quite hard to grasp for policymakers. And I think there are two basic challenges here. One is the changing nature of AI technologies, so making it kind of quite hard to keep track on where are we now, and especially also project towards the future, right? So I think as soon as people start to think about where could AI be in 5 or 10 years, then speculation happens, right? Which can be very unhelpful, right? Because it's very hard to know precisely how this technology will develop in 5 to 10 years. And then that's why you see a lot of speculation around existential risk and artificial general intelligence. And I think also when we look at the global governance initiatives on AI more broadly, there's this, and I see this also as a hindrance to policymakers understanding the complexity. There's this kind of divide between initiatives that target applications of AI in the civilian domain, and then there are other initiatives targeting applications of AI in the military domain. And I think this is quite unhelpful, right? Because we're basically talking about very similar technologies, as Dr. Lal has also addressed, right? So some of these technologies can be used, I mean, they're dual use in nature. They can be used in different kinds of use contexts, right? So I think this kind of division, right, between these different sets of governance initiatives could lead to fragmentation and is potentially problematic.
Thank you, Dr. Bird. Mr. Chirayu, returning to geopolitics, how do you see disparities in the international system affecting the adoption of AI? Will it exacerbate existing power imbalances or create new dynamics?
That's a very interesting question, Samriddhi, because when this newer technologies came, they were primarily based on machines, especially on computing power. And the initial idea was that, it is easy to adopt, replicate, and to an extent, it will advantage the weaker belligerent in warfare. So that was the original idea. But I think the jury is still out. We do not have clarity in terms of whether this is going to benefit the weaker power or the weaker challenger in the game or the powerful challenger in the game. And here it is very difficult to make any blanket statement at either end of the spectrum, or the range of technologies are there in between. And if you see, uh, you know, the number of the way warfare works, we see a series of advances in drones, we see a series of advances in other capabilities, but end of the day, the weaker player in the game finds one way or the other to truncate this asymmetry of power between the two belligerents. So if you see, the first major kind of a test of this idea was when the Soviets, they invaded Afghanistan. Americans provided the Taliban's with the sort of Stinger missiles and other manpads, and this manpads were so easily used. So manpads are basically a shoulder base a device that has a missile. It weighs roughly 15 kilos, including the missile, and using the thermal signature, you can just shoot at a flying fighter jet or a flying missile or whatever aerial object is there. So to fight that sort of a fighter jet, you don't need fighter jets. You can truncate that asymmetry. And then when Americans, in a role reversal, started targeting the Talibans used the same sort of manpads to target even some of the American prowess. So, this advances in drones. Again, another example is that a lot of influx of drones will try to, there are two myths about this. They will try to truncate the asymmetry, and at the same time, they will take away the human element and remove this idea of what we call close combats. So drones from party A and drones from party B, they will be fighting wars with each other, and there won't be any humans at all in the field. Now, that is also another myth. At least the kind of warfare that we are seeing right now, whether it's the Russia-Ukraine war or whether there are another conflicts that are going on, of course, drones are playing increasingly more and more important role. But there too, they do not have the sort of monopoly. The newer advances, they do not have the monopoly. So maybe the US has the most advanced drone, or the NATO army has the most advanced drone, but you also see a lot of influx of very cheap Iranian drones that can actually play around and truncate the asymmetry. So on the one hand, you have the most advanced air defense system with Israel, but with very cheap drones, sometimes made up of the water supply pipes that they put it into small, they chop into small pieces, put the ammo in it, and try to make rockets out of it. These kind of simpler technologies, they try to overwhelm some of the most advanced information detection systems that AI has developed, and still this can overwhelm the system with the basic level of technology. So again, the idea that if you have the technology, you will have a decisive advantage on the battlefield is still not proven great. It all depends on your skills. And again, skill is not the only factor, but skill, technology, terrain, your expertise, your innovation, how can you introduce an element of surprise? All these things are very important. And with very similar kind of technology, under very different fighting conditions, we see technology playing very different kind of roles. So the kind of role that drones played in the Libyan civil war or the Syrian civil war, that was not the role that they played in Azerbaijan and Armenia. For example, I give you the example of how Taliban were easily able to use manpads and bring down a lot of this flying aerial objects to devastate their own people and prevent the advantage that America had. Same, Ukraine also did very well. But if you look at Armenia, Armenia was not able to replicate this against a powerful adversary called Azerbaijan. And they very easily were duped by some of the advanced tactical measures that Azerbaijan used. So it's not always that if you have a certain technology under your belt, you have decisive advantage, because warfare is a combination of skill, technology, organizational adaptation, terrain, climate, your past history, what are the newer innovations that you are bringing into the table? So the jury is still out. And I would like to just make one more point and end this intervention for now. You see, we have talked a lot about actual arms and ammunitions, but there is one area where we have not focused yet is, for example, cybersecurity. There also AI plays a very important role. Now, if you look at one of the finest examples of cyber attack, it's the Stuxnet. The Stuxnet attack that happened on the Iranian nuclear plant. Now, that was not something that would give a decisive advantage to someone. I mean, conceptually, one can think that you can write a piece of malware and shoot at your enemy, and that way technology can truncate the asymmetry between the weaker and the stronger power. But in fact, to write that piece of code that the Americans and Israelis jointly wrote in Stuxnet, it was a huge venture. And whoever initially analyzed, they thought that this is a product of a nation states coming together, and no bunch of geeky people sitting in a basement somewhere can write this kind of code. So all these myths that technology truncates asymmetry, or technology gives decisive advantage, or technology takes away close combat, we do not see that materializing. And final thing, on the highest end of the spectrum, the lethal autonomous weapons that we talked about, of course, only a handful of countries are experimenting this, and asymmetry naturally manifests there, that only the most powerful have that technology. But you actually look at any civil war that is going on in any part of the world, it is not merely a civil war between two countries. Some form of great powers, extra regional powers come and back both sides. So any war then eventually becomes a war between great powers, and even weaker powers can get some of this technology surreptitiously through backdoor. And there is also this huge chance of proliferation. So you don't have to be at the top of the game always, but once you are into that difficult situation of a civil strife or a war, somebody can come and support you because of their geopolitical ambitions, and there is a chance of proliferation. So again, a lot remains to be seen. And as Professor was saying a while ago, the technology itself is in still in evolutionary phases. Its adaptation is also in evolutionary phases, and a lot remains to be seen.
Thank you, Mr. Chirayu. Dr. Lal, I have another pair of questions for you. What are the emerging research trend lines in AI that could significantly impact war and peace in the long term? Moreover, do you envision these advancements as means to mitigate human suffering on the battlefield and beyond?
Yeah, thank you. Those are excellent questions. And in the interest of time, I'll keep my comments brief, but certainly I think new research trend lines in artificial intelligence are poised to significantly impact the aspects that you mentioned. Some of the things I can mention in that context would be machine learning and natural language processing. As an example, I think these technologies enable computers to understand human language, detect patterns, and make predictions. And I believe the United Nations is leveraging these advancements to de-escalate violence and increase international stability. The other area I would mention would be autonomous systems. AI-powered autonomous systems can operate without direct human control, enhancing speed and efficiency. Another aspect, as has been mentioned by Chirayu as well, cybersecurity and information warfare. AI-driven cybersecurity systems can detect and respond to threats, but also raise concerns about AI-powered information warfare. And finally, I would point out predictive maintenance and logistics. AI can, in fact, optimize military logistics and predict equipment failures, reducing downtime and increasing operational readiness. So I think in terms of future direction, as the professor also mentioned, ensuring AI development prioritizes human well-being, safety, and international cooperation, while, of course, there are ongoing discussions like this panel about AI regulation, ethics, and accountability. Those will be crucial.
Thank you, Dr. Lal. Professor Bhatt, after the Second World War, we witnessed the establishment of numerous international treaties regulating warfare. Are there governments or transnational actors currently taking the lead in this direction? And what recommendations would you offer them?
Yes, thank you for this interesting question, Samriti. So, I think I already mentioned one of the initiatives that is set to potentially seek to govern this space, the UN Forum in Geneva I addressed. I think before, and there are actually a number of other initiatives around or have been increasing in the last couple of years, maybe not quite as numerous as in the civilian space, but we still see an increase. But before I kind of respond in more detail to this question, I just want to differentiate a bit between these initiatives in terms of the what they seek to govern, the who seeks to govern, and the how they seek to govern AI in the military space. So I think in terms of the what, these initiatives differ in terms of whether they just look at autonomous weapon systems as their target for governance. So that would be again on the very end of the spectrum that Chirayu helpfully painted for us earlier on. And there are other initiatives that seek to govern AI in the military domain much more broadly. And also, we were also talking about AI in various areas of military decision-making that are related to the use of force, and also, for example, including nuclear command and control, right? And then in terms of the who, I think we mostly see state-led processes, both using international organizations such as the UN as a forum for these processes, but also we see, I think, cross-regional state-led initiatives beyond that, including, for example, at the NATO level. And I think here we see kind of both states kind of acting together in concert, or sometimes also we have initiatives led by particular states. So, for example, there's the US Declaration on Responsible AI in the Military Domain. That is really a US-led effort where they try to bring in a number of countries around the world, but it's kind of originating in the US. And then I think the how is also quite crucial. Like, how do these initiatives seek to govern? I think the basic distinction is whether they maybe see as an end goal a legally binding treaty, so a form of hard law, right, to govern this space, or whether they see their endpoint as being a form of soft law, right, which is just, I'm very sorry, which is basically just that would basically end then at a list of principles then that states can or cannot, right, commit to voluntarily, and would then implement in the national legislations. So. But I think at the moment I'm not quite sure we are either of these stages yet, right? So my recommendation would be actually to follow what has also been championed a lot in this UN Disarmament Forum, to go for a two-tier approach, which means that you would have a set of systems that you would seek to prohibit, and I think these should be these fully autonomous weapon systems, right? So that would operate completely outside of human control, and then would be a second set of systems that integrate some form of AI technologies, and that should be regulated, right? In the form of, for example, stipulating positive obligations around sustaining human control and agency. Also, maybe thinking about contextual limits, right? Like, for example, whether that these systems should not be used in urban warfare, right? Or kind of in kind of these kind of cluttered, noisy environments, right? So where the system would not be able to be used reliably and safely. And I think that I saw that I just want to respond to a question I saw popping up in the chat, which was what I think about the prospects for an international treaty. And I think the prospects are mixed. This is never a really good answer, but I think that's what we see at the moment. On the one hand, I think we see some momentum. So I mean, just this year there have been 2 major state-organized high-level summits on AI in the military domain in Vienna and in Seoul just 2 weeks ago. So there's definitely momentum around this governance question. But at the same time, as also Shirayu mentioned in his interventions, of course, we are in a situation of geopolitical competition, right? So which means that some of the great powers are very reluctant to bind themselves to any form of really legally binding obligation in this space, right? So because there's this kind of fear, right? So that this might curb innovation, that they might lose an edge. Although, and I think I really liked what Shirayu said there, we should not say that technology is not the silver bullet, right? So, and this also includes AI, right? So we can't just kind of assume that if you have access to that, then you will be sorted in terms of military superiority, right? So it's not as simple as that. But of course, it is still a concern, right? So this kind of constant idea, are we falling behind certain other adversaries, right? And how do we maintain this competitive edge?
That's perfect. I mean, Professor Bode has already answered to our even audience question. This is something great. Thank you all for being here today. It was a robust and enlightening discussion. The floor is open for audience questions, and we will be taking only 2 questions due to time constraints. And I have already received an email regarding the question, which is for Dr. Lal and Mr. Thakkar. We have seen a decreasing role of Air Force and an increasing role of drones in the war due to air defenses. Do you see this trend intensifying with drones completely replacing fighter jets?
Yeah, thank you for the question. No, I don't. First of all, the role of the Air Force will remain very strong. I think it will be a combination of manned and unmanned systems moving into the future. And I, as you have technology innovation, as you have the latest and greatest, obviously, to maintain a competitive edge, you'll need to adopt the latest technologies, but not only adopt them, the ability to use them in an operational environment, depending on the conflict. That's both a science and an art, and I think all platforms will continue to be relevant, but certainly, as we can see, the trend is into more unmanned territory, and in that respect, I would say, deterrence by persistent surveillance is going to be the dominant trend. So therefore, if for persistent surveillance, you can do it the surface, you can do it in the air, you can do it in space, but I think persistent surveillance in the air is the most economical method to doing long-term persistent. And so I think that will be a growing area, and I think like-minded countries will put a deep emphasis on persistent surveillance with unmanned systems.
Thank you, Dr. Lal. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We would like to thank Mr. Caudle Green, Ms. Samriddhi Arora, Dr. Vivek Lal, Dr. Ingrid Bode, Dr. Shirayu Thakkar, and all our attendees for joining us today for the celebration of International Day for Universal Access to Information 2024. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.